Sometimes we move through the world like water through a sieve, present but never held. His name was Daniel, 42 years old. He worked on the seventh floor of a building downtown in a department that processed insurance claims. Every morning he arrived at 8:15, not early enough to be noticed, not late enough to be remembered. He sat at his desk by the window, though the window faced another building, and there was nothing to see but gray concrete and the occasional flicker of someone else's office light. His work was careful. He double checked everything. He never missed a deadline. When people needed something from him, he delivered it quietly, on time, without fuss. And when they received it, they took it. Sometimes they said thank you. Most times they didn't. Daniel had learned not to expect much. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself that work was work and recognition was a luxury, not a necessity. But there was something underneath that reasoning, something he didn't like to touch, a feeling that lived in his chest, small and persistent, the feeling of being unseen, not invisible. He knew people saw him. They saw his body, his desk, his emails, but they didn't see him. Not really. He was a function, a task completed, a box checked. And most days, he accepted this. He went home to his small apartment. He made dinner. He watched television. He slept. And in the morning, he did it all again. It wasn't always this way. He used to think that if he worked hard enough, people would notice. That effort had a kind of gravity. That dedication would pull attention toward him naturally, without him needing to ask for it. But the years taught him otherwise. He watched colleagues who spoke louder get promoted. He watched people who took credit for group work rise faster. He watched charm win over competence again and again, and he didn't resent them. Not really. He just felt tired. Tired of hoping. Tired of waiting for someone to say, "We see you, we know what you do." So he stopped waiting. He told himself it was maturity, letting go of childish needs, being professional. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and the television was off, he could feel it, that small, persistent ache. The one that whispered, "Does anyone know I'm here?" He didn't talk about it. Not to friends, not to family. He barely admitted it to himself. Because what would he even say that he wanted to be seen? It sounded needy. It sounded weak. So he carried it silently, the way people carry so many things. And he kept working, kept delivering, kept being the person no one thought about until they needed something. It happened on a Wednesday. He had stayed late to finish a report, not because anyone asked him to, but because he knew it needed to be done. And he knew he was the one who would do it right. By the time he finished, the office was nearly empty. He printed the report, stapled it, and walked it over to his manager's desk. She was still there, on a phone call, her back to him. He set the report down quietly. She glanced over her shoulder, saw him, and gave a small nod. Then she said, still looking at her screen, still half focused on her call, "Thank you." The words were automatic, reflexive. She didn't look at him, not really. And Daniel stood there for a moment, just a moment. And something in him cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture, deep inside. He walked back to his desk. He sat down. He stared at the gray building across from his window, and he felt it fully, maybe for the first time, the weight of being unseen, not by her, not by any one person, but by the world, by the endless chain of moments where he gave and gave and gave, and no one paused long enough to meet his eyes. He sat there for a long time. The office grew darker. The cleaning staff came through, emptying trash bins, vacuuming floors. They didn't see him either. And in that silence, Daniel realized something. He had been waiting all this time, waiting for someone to look at him and say, I see you, waiting for his work to speak for itself, waiting for the world to reward his quiet dignity with acknowledgement. But the world didn't work that way. The world moved fast. It looked at what was loud, what demanded attention, what couldn't be ignored. And Daniel had spent his whole life being easy to ignore. He felt the sadness of it deeply, not with bitterness, just with a kind of quiet grief. For all the years he had hoped, for all the moments he had waited, for all the times he had told himself it didn't matter when it did. But then, sitting in that dim office, something else emerged. A thought, small and steady. Maybe being seen isn't what I think it is. He sat with that. He let it settle, and slowly, carefully, he realized. He had been measuring his worth by other people's attention, by whether they looked at him, by whether they remembered him, by whether they paused long enough to acknowledge what he had done. But his worth wasn't there. It wasn't in their eyes. It was in the work itself, in the care he brought to it, in the integrity he carried, even when no one was watching, especially when no one was watching. He thought about the report on his manager's desk. It was good work, thorough, honest. It would help people, even if they never knew his name. And that mattered, not because someone thanked him, but because he knew. He knew what he had done. He knew the care he had taken, and no one could take that from him, not even indifference. Daniel sat in the dark office, and he felt something shift. Not a solution, not an answer, just a quiet turning, a recognition. That dignity didn't need an audience. It didn't need applause. It didn't need to be seen. It just needed to be lived. He left the office that night and walked home slowly. The streets were quieter than usual. A light rain had started to fall. He didn't rush. He let the rain touch his face. He thought about all the people in the world who did their work quietly, who showed up, who cared, who gave their best, even when no one was watching. He thought about how much of the world ran on that kind of quiet effort. The janitor who cleaned the floors, the nurse who checked on patients in the middle of the night, the teacher who stayed late to grade papers, all of them unseen, all of them essential. And he realized he was part of that, not special, not unique, just one of many people who carried the world forward without expecting credit. And there was something humble in that, something true. He still felt the ache sometimes, the wish to be seen. It didn't disappear, but it felt different now, smaller, less urgent, because he understood something he hadn't before. Being seen by others was a gift, but it wasn't a measure. It wasn't proof. The proof was in the doing, in the showing up, in the quiet choice every day to bring care to his work, to be decent, to be steady, to be himself, whether anyone noticed or not. That was dignity, not loud, not demanding, just quiet, Just there, Daniel walked home through the rain, and he felt lighter. Not because anything had changed, but because he had. He didn't need the world to see him. He just needed to see himself. And he did, clearly, quietly, enough. Stories are why we move forward. Stories are where hope begins again. This is an original quiet story created for this space. You're welcome to subscribe. A gentle like is always appreciated.